If you are a man of integrity, you know real quick when you're not living towards your core values, and it will eat at you. Every day is a new opportunity to make a decision. Every day is an opportunity to say, I've had enough, and I'm going to make a change today. And eventually in my career, I've made jumps from 33,000 feet in the air at night with 100 pounds of gear on me on an O2 mask, which would have been the wildest roller coaster ride anyone could ask to go on. We need to capture these stories, and these stories need to be heard, and for future generations. If you want to obtain abnormal things and go to a high level, you have to do abnormal things, and you have to push yourself to a high level. And the human body is absolutely an amazing thing. You can break it down and it will come back, and you can break it down again and it will come back. It all comes down to how bad do you want it? What decisions are you willing to make to get what you're really after?
Freedom is the song that we sing as we march on.
Okay, Brent, thank you so much for joining us here today on The Road to Greatness. This is an amazing episode, and I'm so excited to have you here. So I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you having me.
What I would love to start off with asking you is, I'm sure that you get asked a lot, to be doing different interviews, podcasts, stuff like that. What inspired you to say yes to this documentary?
For the same reason I'm grateful that people say yes to come on my podcast, because I think we need to capture these stories, and these stories need to be heard, and for future generations.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the whole intention of this, is to show that, what makes America great goes so much far beyond even just politics or slogans or anything like that. And I love America just as much as anybody, but I really wanted to create this along with my team to show, it's really about core values. And that is really, in my opinion, what makes America so great. And what better opportunity to sit down with men like you and the others in this series to talk about the core values that built America. So we will get into that in a second. But for the viewers that are watching this, can you share a little bit about who you are, your service, and let's just start there.
Absolutely. Again, my name's Brent Tucker. I joined just days after September 11th, 2001. That was the catalyst that got me to join the military. And shortly after joining, I wanted to do more. The terrorist attack on our Twin Towers and on our soil really motivated me. And in return, I wanted to do the most I can do during my service. So after a few years of being in air defense, I tried out for United States Army Special Forces in 2003. I was fortunate enough to be selected, and I was a Green Beret from 2000. The course is pretty long, from 2005 to about 2010, and from there, I wanted to see where else I could serve this great nation, and I tried out for the Delta Force, and from 2011 to 2021, I served as a Delta Force operator.
Amazing, and thank you for that. So how did you, what inspired you? I know you mentioned 9/11, of course, but did you grow up with men around you that served in the military? Did you have experience with that?
I didn't, Mel. I did grow up in a very pro-military house, but from a young age, if you'd asked me if I was going to join the military, I'd have told you no.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been a surprise to me. Grew up in a small town with family that ran a family business. So that's all I wanted to do, was continue to run the family business that my grandfather started. But when I say pro-military, my dad loved fighter jets. And we would go to air shows. He would read Tom Clancy books and buy us model airplanes and grill us on what was that plane? What's that plane? That's an F-4 Phantom. That's an F-14 Tomcat. So in that aspect, we were always very pro-military, but I did not see it in my future.
Wow. And then here you are now.
Right. Yes. It was not your, I don't think it was, to be completely transparent, I don't think anyone would have guessed it. I was scared to ride on roller coasters as a kid. I was athletic, but I was undersized, and I wasn't the bravest of kids. But life has a funny way of taking turns that you don't expect.
Okay, so this is crazy because for somebody that is Delta to tell me that he's afraid or was afraid to be on roller coasters is quite funny. So we have to dive into this a little bit.
Yeah.
How did you build that courage?
That's an interesting question, and I'm thinking about it right now. But I would say out of necessity. There was no necessity for me to have to get on that roller coaster besides just being harassed by my dad and my two brothers, which was no big deal. But again, when something rattles you to your core, so much as 3,000 Americans dying on September 11th, roller coasters didn't seem to be that big of a deal anymore. In fact, the military was going to ask me to do much more than ride on roller coasters. Sure. They were going to ask me to jump out of airplanes, originally starting at about 5,000 to 8,000 feet. And eventually in my career, I've made jumps from 33,000 feet in the air at night with 100 pounds of gear on me on an O2 mask, which would have been I think the wildest roller coaster ride anyone could ask to go on.
I would imagine so, yeah.
But you do it out of necessity.
Yeah, what I'm hearing you say is when, I can speak for myself in my own life in a different way for sure, but when my attention is on purpose, then the fear subsides.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? It's like, okay, the courage gets built out of necessity. It's a great way to put it. But in my experience, it's like, hey, okay, sure, there can be fear, but if my attention is on my purpose and what has to get done, then there's no other option. And so the reason I'm bringing this up is because courage is the absolute number one core value. And I'm going to chat about the Sacred 7 core values here in a second, but courage is number one because without courage, where is humanity as a whole? Where is the individual? Where, it's like courage, without courage, you can't start that business. You can't join any, thing bigger than you, like the military or anything like that.
Absolutely. And, to dovetail on that, without fear, without risk, without some sort of negative effect, it's not courageous.
Sure.
If you don't you can go as far as not. I've seen people do what some people think are courageous, but they didn't even necessarily understand the environment they were in. They didn't know the danger they were in. They made that decision. So in a weird way, it's not courageous unless you understand the risk you're taking, unless you have a heart full of fear and have to do it anyway.
That's where you build it.
And that's where you build it.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, totally. So let me walk you through the Sacred 7 core values. And we might have chatted about this a little bit before, but I'm just going to walk you through and also the viewers here, and then we'll debrief it, if you will. Okay. Yeah. So courage, first of all, Sacred 7 core values was created by a group of men, pretty big group of men, probably about 10 or 12 of them. A couple of them are Marines. And they really looked at, hey, if we could live, we humanity, individuals and whatnot, but if we could live by a pathway to become a successful person, a good person, just giving a roadmap, what would these core values be? And they narrowed it down to these 7, and it actually is in order of importance. And that's probably the biggest thing to know here. So courage is number 1. So in our world, we say that this is, like we were saying, it takes courage to do anything in life, right? But it's really the courage to be honest. And honesty is our second core value. And what we say is self-honesty. So a lot of people like to be honest with, hey, you need to go to the gym, or you need to do this, or, but it's a pretty rare quality to say, I need to get this done, or I need to be more of this or whatnot, right?
Right.
So the courage in this world, in this context, is the courage to be self-honest. So honesty is number 2. The third one is integrity, which we're going to get into in a few minutes. But the courage to be honest leads to that integrity, right? If you're not courageously self-honest with yourself, then you don't really develop that level of integrity or have the boldness to stand for something, right? So courage to be honest leads to that integrity, which then requires commitment. So the commitment is the next one. That's where the rubber meets the road. That if you're living by, courageously self-honest, you're in integrity, it is going to require commitment to bust through those old habits. And really just the old voice inside your head, our head, that goes, it wants to tell you the old story. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And then once you are living, and you're totally committed to this, to being courageously self-honest, in integrity, you're committed, it's your duty, which is the next one. It's your duty to honor, love. So the last 3 there are the duty, honor, and love. And in this world, we say, okay, you're living dutiful. Honor is bestowed upon you. We all know somebody that says, I'm honorable, but maybe their actions are a little bit different. In this world, it's like, hey, Brent, he's an honorable man. I know him. I've had conversations. He's in integrity. His words match his actions. He's an honorable human being. And then finally, you get to love. And the question I always ask people that are sitting in this chair is, because I said it's in the order of importance, why do you believe that love is last in that order?
Well, right off the bat, I am not jealous of those 10 to 12 men at all who had to try to name those characteristics and put them in order. I could only imagine the amount of arguing, in a good way, that happened in that room.
Men of the round table.
Yeah, that is a tall task, but a good one, and it needs to be done. Just like you said, it's a roadmap. Why do I think love is last? If I take a stab at it, I would say if you put the other ones in those order, you almost wouldn't even have to put love on the list. Of course, love has to be on the list, but then love would happen naturally if everything else is in order.
I think you're one of the only people that has ever answered it in that way, and that's exactly how these guys saw it. It's like a lot of people say, hey, I love you, but then if they're not actually courageous, self-honest, in integrity, you know what I mean? Then what is love? And, and we're in the self-defense world and stuff like that. And we always see a lot of people come in our training, and a lot of things have happened to people that say, I love, a lot of bad things have happened to people that say, oh, I love you. And then the lights go off and something bad happens to them. So it's like, hey, is it the word I love you, or is it the actions that actually go with the words? And that's kind of what these guys and these men were looking at and it's a pathway. A lot of people say, how do you love? How can you describe love? And that's like a whole nother conversation, right? But it's a pathway. Hey, be courageous, be self-honest with yourself.
I think, and obviously this is military themed, and for a group of guys who probably say I love you the least, because it's just not the type of people we are, our actions say I love you the most. With one of my favorite Bible verses, John 15, which in this context defines love as this: greater love hath no man than a brother laid down his life for his, than you lay down the life for your brother, which has happened here at the Navy SEAL Museum all throughout these halls.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter what you say, it matters what you do.
I know that verse well.
Yeah.
And yes, absolutely. So today we are here to talk about integrity. That's what the purpose of this episode is. So let's define integrity. We really felt like you were a perfect fit for integrity, and I appreciated our conversation before this. But to you, just tell me a little bit what integrity means to you.
think integrity, really, when you talk about the other core principles, and I'm sure they all do to some degree, but I focused on integrity, and they overlap and into others, right? So, and integrity is the qualities of being honest and ethical and having strong moral principles that are consistently used, and it's what you do when no one's watching. And everyone always likes to say that you do when no one's watching. That's kind of an understood one. But ethics and being ethical also has to do when people are watching. It goes back to being ethical with yourself and being honest with yourself.
Sure.
There's things you can do in front of other people and you can get away with it, but you still choose to do the right thing. I think the integrity portion of it really is one of the main foundations of our military. And it's true in peacetime and in war, because a military with integrity in peacetime is prepared for war. And a military at war with integrity will come home with honor. I can't think of to me, be really hard pressed to think of something that's a better attribute for our military than integrity.
Can you share with me and the audience a time where you've stood up for integrity and what's right?
Yes. I told you at one point that our military is one of the last sacred bastions in this country that we still put up on a pedestal, and it is because of integrity. Of course, our military is not perfect, and no one is, and there has been times where people have come back and been less than truthful about their war stories and what they actually did overseas, and it's tough because the American people like to hear war stories, and a part of you wants them to keep up the facade that these stories are all true. But integrity is a funny thing. It's not always easy, and there have been certain individuals of the military who have come back and written books and sold stories that just weren't true, and I knew they weren't true, and I vetted that they weren't true from other people, and I've called them out to correct the record, because the only people who can really maintain the integrity of the military and do that is the military. So it's really on us to protect that integrity, and that's what I've had to do. And it can be bittersweet at times, but I do believe it's a necessary thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's doing the right thing when everybody's watching, like we were
Exactly.
saying. And,
Right.
it's what leads to honor. That's exactly why we selected you for this episode of integrity, because as viewers watching, we really applaud what's going on with you standing up for what is right. And that is what leads to honor.
And it's happened at our highest levels of special operations, and but if we don't stop it and say, hey, the line stops here, you cannot use your service and lie and manipulate the American people for fame, money, and fortune. If we don't stop it, then what stops the next generation of people who saw that happen? Because everyone in the military knew those stories weren't true, so it wasn't a big secret to us. So what keeps the next generation from seeing that and then capitalizing on that and saying, hey, they lied, got away with it, were rewarded with it, and there was no downside to doing it except, again, money, fame, and fortune. So it really, some people saw it as drama, and that is the downside of integrity. There is. It didn't. Not everyone was happy to see what they perceived as veterans calling out other veterans. But again, who else was going to do it? And if we don't stop it now, what will prevent it in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about being the guardian. Sometimes you got to be the guardian for what's right.
Right. And I just happen to be in some of these instances the first one to do it in the most public setting with my podcast. But the support of the veteran community that rallied and say, hey, he's right. This should have been said a long time ago, and we should have never let it get to this point, was also humbling. So so I'm grateful for that as well.
Yeah, you have a lot of support for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you make a great point because, as of right now, 2026, everybody's watching all the time. Everybody's
right.
So it's almost easier at this point to get away with things when no one's watching. But when you have a presence online or any sort of, you're in a spotlight in any capacity, everybody's watching. So even if you do the right thing and stand up for what's right, the feedback of that, and it's going to take that commitment and resilience, right?
Absolutely. And I really think our military is one of the last respected bastions left in this country. And it's because of the integrity that our military has had. And thankfully, great men have picked up that flag and continued with that culture that they started. And hopefully my generation continued, and hopefully the generation today will continue. And I'm sure they will. But our military is still respected, and integrity is a big part of that.
Yeah, the American dream is very much still alive. And that's what my purpose of showing people this through interviewing great men like yourself, that, I know there's two sides to everything. And there's so much love for America that the world is watching. And that's the purpose of this docuseries. So what I like to do is always contrast things. So we spoke about what it feels like to be in integrity with ourselves, with God, with, just living as an individual that is in integrity, right? Feeling fulfilled. Right. Have you ever, and I'm sure you have, but can you tell us about a time that you felt maybe the complete opposite? Every human goes through this. So out of integrity, unfulfilled, just anything like that in your life?
Absolutely. And one, it's a horrible feeling because it goes back to if you are a man of integrity, you know real quick when you're not living towards your core values, and it will eat at you. When I was in the Delta Force, it's the premier hostage rescue and high value target military unit in our whole country, and the standards are very, very high every day. They demand perfection, and it's a lot. And the amount of time and focus and energy it takes to be at that level is a lot. And there are times that you either get tired. There's times that I was a family man. I still had a wife and kids that take up your bandwidth. And when your life gets out of balance, and you allow it to get out of balance for too long, it eats at you, and it eats at you. And you show up to work every day hoping today's not the day you get tested, because you're not prepared for this. And when you live outside, again, of that integrity spectrum that you should fall in, it eats at you, as it should.
Yeah, if you're a good man, like you said, the difference between what's right and wrong, right?
Right.
So the times that maybe that was eating at you and stuff like that, what did you have to apply to get yourself back into, what's right and righteousness and feeling good and moving forward?
The good news about that is every day is a new opportunity to make a decision. And it doesn't matter if that's integrity. It doesn't matter if it's something as simple as happiness. It doesn't matter if it's something as more important as the walk with your Lord. Every day is an opportunity to say, I've had enough, and I'm going to make a change today. And I know some people are will either say it's not that easy, but it is. And some people are going to want a more complex answer, because the more complex it is, the more it makes them feel better when they're not doing it. But it's just that simple. One day, I woke up and I said, no, I'm not going to do that today. I've got to get back on path to being what I demand of myself, what my teammates demand of me, what my country demands of me. And you have to stop it at some point.
Yeah, what you're saying, what I'm hearing is people's free will and how much it's asleep in a lot of people, right? Because it really does come down to a decision.
Right.
And we forget, I get to decide. I get to decide how I feel. I get to decide what I believe. I get to decide what actions I'm going to take today. But ultimately, I do believe that a lot of humanity has forgotten their free will and how to exercise it with self.
Right.
This is I'm talking about within self. And I have a great mentor, Marine, and I remember him saying a quote that said something like, when you decide that you absolutely have to, you will. So just decide you absolutely have to.
It really is that easy. You bring up free will. And a lot of people talk about free will when it comes to sin or the negative. You have the free will to do that. But they always seem to forget the other side of the coin. As easy as it is to make a negative decision, you have the free will to make a positive decision. Now, I will say this, and for whatever reason, it just two sides. The contrast isn't always the same in this one. You can make a good decision day after day after day after day, and it's still really easy to make a bad decision. However, when you go down that negative road, and let's just take alcoholism,
Sure.
for a second. Every day you go down that road of alcoholism, the decision to turn around gets harder and harder. Now, it's always there, but it gets harder and harder, which is why it's important to make the right decision sooner than later.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. Yeah. So what would you say, one of the biggest qualities I feel that any man that I've ever spoken to that has been Delta, and, I've just researched a lot about, the differences between, Delta and maybe other units. And one of the biggest things that I've seen is the individuation that it requires. And that is, I always look at things from a humanity consciousness level. And when most of the world is living in the pack, pack animals and whatnot, right? And I could go on, and we do a lot of active shooter training, and it's like we've got to train for people to be a leader. And it's nice to say, oh yeah, I would do that, or I would be the leader because I am an entrepreneur or whatever, But to actually be the leader under that level of stress and duress, it's something that it can be born. You can be just born a natural leader, but under that level of stress and duress, we do find it requires training, right? But in Delta, you guys go through a level of individuation that the world is not, that we don't see it often. So can you speak to that and what you gain from it?
Sure. When it comes to a pack mentality or group mentality, there are benefits to that. People can be swayed. When you speak of culture, rarely are you really talking about the culture of an individual. Culture comes within a group of people. So if you're working within a group of people with a healthy culture, that momentum carries, and that's a good thing. But the problem with that is, to some degree, is you're 1 weak link away from the next. Every pack has a real leader, and it can change with that leader. When you have when you have a group of strong individuals that are all the duality of each one capable of being a leader, but also being able to work as a team, that's really hard to select for, but the unit somehow does a job of figuring that out. One of my favorite sayings from the building is, an individual required to be driven is not worth the drive. And in a group, there will be times you have to drive someone to do the right thing. But if you have a group of individuals, the constant weight of you not being the weak link, it's up to you. It may be all up to you. At any point, you could be an individual going somewhere, and you can't depend on a team. Really forces you to be at your best.
What did you learn about you personally in that training? I mean, you were Green Beret before, so obviously that's an accomplishment right there. But then going to that next level of Delta, like, what did you personally, I mean, I'm looking at the guy that was afraid of roller coasters, you know, to now
Right.
Delta, like, you know, during that individuation, like, what did you personally go through and learn?
I never thought I was the absolute best at anything. I never had some sort of complex that I thought I wasn't good. I always knew I was good. But yeah, I've said it before. I wasn't the best guy on my special forces team, but I was the one that went to the Delta Force. What you really learn about yourself is everybody truly has equal opportunity. It's what you decide to do with that. And the other thing that I think I learned is, if you want to obtain abnormal things and go to a high level, you have to do abnormal things, and you have to push yourself to a high level. And the human body is absolutely an amazing thing. You can break it down and it will come back, and you can break it down again and it will come back. It all comes down to, how bad do you want it? What decisions are you willing to make to get what you're really after? So on Friday nights, I trained up for Delta Force selection here in Florida during the summer, where it's so hot. You can't ruck for 6 hours straight in 100-degree heat. You just can't drink enough water. So I would have to ruck at night, and I would ruck 3-4 times a week. You know, when my friends are calling me on a Friday night saying, "Hey, let's go to the bar and let's go have fun," you know, I had to tell them, I can't go out tonight. And I would never tell them in a boastful way, "Oh no, I'm training up for something big." I just said I couldn't go tonight, and I quietly hung up the phone and went and picked up my rucksack and went for 10 and 15, 20-mile walks in the middle of the night. So everyone had that opportunity to do that. I just was the one who did it. And it doesn't make me special. It's just anyone could have done it. And at any point, they can just, anyone hearing this story can hear the same story, and they can do what I did, and they have just as much of an opportunity to go where I went.
Yeah, absolutely. It's applying your will, like we said, for the right use of the will, like we were talking about earlier. What would you say to, like, a younger generation right now, you know, that's maybe a young boy or young man that is thinking about joining the military, that he's watching, you know, the epitome of greatness, right? Delta Force. What would you say to that young man?
I'd give them the same advice that really drove me internally. And this is the same fork in the road that I came to over 9/11. It was the same fork in the road that I came to when it came to going to Special Forces selection. It's the same fork in the road it came to Delta Force selection, where I had an opportunity to do something that was hard. Wasn't what necessarily that I wanted to do as far as ease and fun of life. And there was a hard path that fewer people chose, and each one of those forks in the road, fewer people had chosen it. And when trying to figure that out, it's kind of a simple, almost overly simple thing, but this is every time. I say when I'm an old man and I'm 70 or 80 years old and I look back in my life, if I don't join the military, if I don't become a Green Beret, if I don't at least try to be in the Delta Force, will I look back and have a regret on this life and say, I didn't try to do everything that I could have, that this life provided me. And every time when I looked at it through that lens, the answer was actually really easy. So I don't want to be an old man with any regrets, and it worked out for me pretty good, and I'm really proud of the things that I was able to accomplish.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. As you're talking, the name of this documentary is The Road to Greatness, right? So it's greatness that you're talking about that I'm hearing you say, because I also find greatness is a rare quality. A lot of people, and I can relate in my life where times where we just settle for like mediocre, and that could be in the smallest thing. It could be in anything, like around your house or things that like just where we settle for mediocrity, versus the rare quality of I'm demanding greatness. I'm demanding greatness out of myself. I'm demanding greatness out of others, and anybody who works with us and for us knows that my husband's a Marine, so he demands greatness out of me included, everybody. There is greatness demanded. This standard, like you were talking about earlier with Delta, the standard is high every single day, and that is a way of life that it's very uncommon.
Yeah, there's one caveat to that I learned later after I made that decision of a life of no regrets. And I told myself, if I don't get selected or if I'm not able to join the military, it's okay. I tried. But what the caveat is, if I tried and I look back and I agree that it was no shortcoming of mine that I didn't make it, that I prepared every day, every week, every month, and I showed up completely prepared for this. After that, you've done everything you can do. The cards fall where the cards fall. At the end of the day, you're on an unknown path of God's plan, and He'll put you where you're supposed to be. But it's up to you to make sure that you show up prepared. And so I showed up prepared for everything.
Yeah, being all in on something.
Being all in.
Yeah.
Almost obsessive is really what it takes. And people talk about a work-life balance. There's no such thing in greatness to a work-life balance, and people don't want to hear that. Maybe they can't even understand that, and then it's going to sound like such a horrible thing to say, but maybe greatness isn't for them. But there is no greatness without sacrifice. There is no greatness without sacrifice, and it will come to a decision of time. And there's no shortcuts to it, and no one's just naturally going to be great. It takes time, it takes work, and it takes devotion.
Yeah, I always look at it like, where is my attention? If my attention is on greatness, then the actions follow that, right? Okay, I'm all in. Obsessive, I know a thing or two about that. I'm a pretty obsessive individual myself. But yeah, when your attention and my attention is on purpose, and it's duty. It goes back to the sacred 7 core values. Then all my actions are aligning on that, and yeah, just paying attention to where is the location of my attention. Is it on the part that goes, oh, I can't do it, or you shouldn't do that, or blah, blah, blah? Or is it on, hey, I'm all in on this goal or what's happening, right?
Absolutely. And there's different phases of life. And sometimes that obsessive part to do this thing you so want to do in life, it's just a phase in life. It doesn't mean that you won't be there for your kids for the next 50 years.
Right.
But I also think it's a little bit naive as a man, to be honest with you, to think that I will be there for my kids every day of their life for the next 50 years. As a provider, there will be times that I have to make sacrifices to make sure that I can provide for them in the long term.
Absolutely.
And I think this generation, has done a poor job, just to be honest with you, of accepting that that there are consequences, and it will feel negative of success, but it is necessary. You cannot do everything. You have to make hard decisions.
I completely agree with you. We interviewed a World War II veteran in the first episode of this, and I asked him something along the lines of, what was different then when he grew up to now. And one of the things he said were men and women were women, basically.
Love it.
And yeah, men aren't always around. If you want a protector and a provider, then sorry, you're not going to always have somebody that's in front of you every single second, right?
Right.
So we're on the same page on that. I agree with you. So something that you were talking about earlier, we kind of touched upon is the leadership. There's the individuation, but then every single person is capable of being a leader, right? Mm-hmm. What I like is look at what one leader can do for generations to come, for humanity, for everything, right? I know I'm going to use a great example, which is our current president, Donald Trump. But, if we look at 2016, when we first got introduced, MAGA was not a thing. It didn't exist. This thing got birthed, and it took one leader to stand up and say, I'm done with the old way. No. This is the way we're going, and demonstrate. My personal belief is he has demonstrated look at how many leaders came out of his leadership. Now I've met so many people over the last years, that are like leading in, now there's Maha, there's MAGA, there's all these different, and then there's the little local people too. I say little, but you know what I mean? The local people that are leading, dinners, and now there's all these people that are running for Congress, for Senate, that would have never, ever done that without one leader standing up for integrity, what we're talking about, and one leader just stepping up, and the ripple effect that has for people.
I think it's almost an unfortunate, but I don't think it is unfortunate. I think it's just a little bit of a causation of the type of people, and to generalize, I don't think it's wrong to generalize, of the left and the right. And on the right, you have what's commonly referred to as the quiet majority. And I think that's a good thing. I don't think there's a reason to be loud all the time. There's almost never really reason to be loud, really, until pushed, which is really what happened. Because I think there was a lot of people that saw Donald Trump and saw his movement, and it blew the left's mind that he could ever be president. You can go back to the videos. They mocked him. They mocked the idea that he had a chance at winning, because the only thing they heard were the loudest voices, but the loudest voices weren't the majority. And so it gave that the quiet part of this country, who were starting to feel like we're all on the wrong track, and say, hold on, there's more like us. And they went out and they voted with their voices at the polls, and he won. And I think that started this momentum of more conservative Americans saying, there's more to us there's more here than we thought.
Oh yeah.
And And it ended up, again, creating a momentum that we're still seeing to this day.
Yeah, I completely agree. So a couple last things I want to ask you is this. So, I have the amazing opportunity to sit down with you, but there's a lot of people that are watching this that see you and men like you as their heroes. They look up and they hear Delta and they just, it's their hero. Who would you say is your hero?
My dad. So that's not the easiest question all day.
I love that.
My dad. My dad is the reason I ever had a chance at becoming a Delta Force operator. My dad showed me what a man was like. He showed me what a man was like at an early age. My dad put in 60 hours of work. He didn't make it to a lot of my games. Most people think, that's what a dad is, a loving dad who makes it to everything and tells you he loves you every day. I'm not saying that's a bad thing by any means, but I think that type of man gets quickly overlooked, in today's society. That my dad was just a guy who worked 60 hours a week, made sure that I was provided for, and I saw it by his actions what a man was. And he didn't talk to me a whole lot, but he always made time to talk to me. And because he didn't talk to me a whole lot at times, it made me listen every time he talked. And it really, really set root into me. And the older I got, I didn't forget anything that my dad told me, because he walked the walk and he talked the talk, and enabled me to be the man that I became.
Yeah, you can tell. I could tell just by sitting down with you. I said, wow, I bet his father was his hero. I'm not kidding. I could tell that just from talking to you, just
And he
by
still
you
is.
demonstrating, the leadership that he had and you paying it forward.
Well, and he's one of the godless men that I know as well. Every aspect about him is he has set a high standard to follow.
Mm. It's great motivation, right?
That it is.
Yeah.
It's like playing catch up all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, last question that we ask everybody on here.
All right.
What makes America great?
America's great because of Americans. America's great because of our culture and American culture. And to speak bluntly about it, we have to stop celebrating the what's happening to our culture of watering it down. So, and our culture has to do with our Christian morality, with our hard work, the things back to what, and not to make it political, because I'm going to quote a Democrat who used to say things like, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. We have to get back to that giving back mentality, and not that that constantly take mentality. And that was our hard-nosed, old-school American culture that made us the greatest nation in the world. So the American culture is what makes America great, and we have to protect it, and to some degree we have to get back to it.
I agree with you. And that's what this series is for.
I love it. That's why I said yes.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And thank you so much, Brent. We really appreciate it. And we will we'll definitely stay in touch from this point forward.
Thanks for having me.
If you enjoyed this episode on the road to greatness, then make sure you catch this video to learn from another veteran on what makes America great and the core values that build America.